Hello, this is Paramjeet Singh. Welcome to another episode of Passing Clouds podcast. We have been off for a couple of months now during summer, and now we are back with a new slate of ideas and topics. So, as we know that we are still going through the pandemic, and two things are always on mind: immunity and fear. Somehow they both are very related to each other. However, in this podcast, I'm going to share with you two recent studies which maybe interest you or someone in your circle. First study was published in the journal Cancer and is related to breast cancer survivors. Second study is related to anxiety and what can we do to tame it. If you notice, pandemic is very much related to immunity and fear. And as I said before, these two things are very much related to each other. So let's talk about the first study that is published in the journal Cancer a couple of months back. And it was related to what we call chemo fog. When women or any individual who goes through chemotherapy, they often experience this brain fog, which is a cognitive impairment. They cannot think through clearly, they cannot act from that state of clarity. And it seems that about 78% of women population undergoing chemo often report noticeable cognitive impairment. As I said, it is often labeled as chemo fog. Brain images studies also show that it could be due to loss of functional connectivity in the brain. So that's a jargon for saying that various parts of the brain required to think and act together are not working together very well. In this study on Belgian women, group exposed to mindfulness based intervention registered improvement in subjective feeling of cognitive improvement. They also experienced less emotional distress and fatigue related to chemotherapy. Brain images also showed that brain parts started to show more connectivity, that there was enhanced communication among various parts of the brain, which led the participant to experience lessened emotional distress, fatigue, and consequently what we call the brain fog. Though the study has its own limitations, it is worth knowing that previous studies have also supported the value of mindfulness skills in cancer recovery, including inducing positive changes at a genetic level. So that is the first study about women and relate to their cancer recovery and how the mindfulness can be useful as a adjunctive therapy to speed up the recovery process by clarifying or clearing up the cognitive repercussions of chemotherapy and all other attending side effects to chemo. The second study I want to share with you is related to fear and anxiety. And as we all know, pandemic continues and nobody is certain how things are going to go once fall flu season collides with COVID-19 symptoms. It is expected that fear and anxiety of infection and sickness would continue to have corrosive impact on health. It's worth knowing that sustained fear and anxiety are strong biological responses with measurable consequences on health and well being. Though some fears are possibly manageable through thought rearrangement or reappraisal, others are not. Is there a way, especially a non pharmacological method, to deal with fear and anxiety? One such strategy is mindfulness, which teaches us the value of awareness and equanimity. It helps us become aware while being equanimous. While it's easier to muster courage to be aware and attentive, it takes a veil of courage and practice to stay equanimous during the rush of emotional distress. In this context, a recent study published in the Journal of Brain and Behavior suggested that mindfulness training tends to reduce anxiety through inducing changes in certain parts of the brain, which are essential in unlearning and unloading anxious and fearful encounters. A similar review study published in Biological Psychiatry in 2019 also suggested the same, that mindfulness training induced changes in hippocampus, which is a part of the brain very much essential for learning and unlearning, thereby helping in unlearning the fear. Let's keep in mind that sustained stress or aggravation tend to foster habitual response patterns, such as automatic behaviors, by weakening the connection between the frontal cortex, which is oftenly called the thinking part or executive part of the brain, and the hippocampus, the another part of the limbic system, which is heavily involved in learning and memory. Sustained stress also kills neuron in this part of the brain. So less neuron, which means you have less potential to learn unlearning stuff, which is bad for learning and deploying new strategies. That's why you might have noticed that even a short term stress can hamper the way we do things. For example, you will start to forget keys and you will start to do small mistakes when you're having a stressful day. So it's very essential to notice that stress has an immediate measurable impact on the way the brain functions. And it also speeds up the growth of new neurons in the part of the brain which is heavily involved in stress response, the part called amygdala. So that's again bad. When you are stressed out, when you're fearful, when you're going through emotional distress, the hippocampus is compromised. It also strengthens the part of the brain which is heavily involved in freaking us out. So whenever we are talking about fear and stress, I think we have to figure out and think about how these things impact our biological system. And then once that impact is understood, we can start to figure out how we can lessen its impact on psychological health. So that's it for now. If you are unfamiliar with mindfulness practice and would like to test drive it, check out my previous podcast and explore my website. Or better still, get in touch with me through my website www.paramjitsingh.com and I will send you a short MP3 recording. If you like this podcast, if you like the topic, please like, subscribe, share with others, and click on the notification button so that whenever we post a new podcast, you will get an automatic notification. Thank you for coming back to us. Have a wonderful and safe fall, and we'll continue to talk to you. Thank you very much for spending time with me.